All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're talking all about getting ready for the CCSP exam,
Yeah, the CCSP.
which means you're stepping into the world of cloud security.
Yeah, definitely cloud security is a hot topic these days.
It is. So, for anyone listening, I know you've probably hit the books and you've got the basics down, but we're going beyond that. We're going beyond the definition
Really going to get into it today.
and getting into the nitty-gritty of software security.
This is the cloud.
So, we're going to cover a lot of ground today.
Absolutely. The CCSP exam is really comprehensive.
It is.
So we'll be diving into the entire software development lifecycle. We'll be talking about supply chain risks and then even, how human behavior can really impact security in the cloud.
Yeah, because that's a big part of it that's sometimes overlooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's kick things off by talking about building secure software. So we often hear about these secure coding practices, but what does that even really mean? What does that entail? And why is it so important, particularly in a cloud environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really boils down to integrating security into every single stage of the software development process.
Got it.
It can't just be an afterthought.
From the beginning.
Right from the very start.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about common vulnerabilities that we hear about so often, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, a lot of these could be prevented with secure coding practices right from the get-go.
So it's like baking it into the DNA of the software rather than, as you said, it's an afterthought. It's not something you just add on at the end.
Exactly.
Okay. So, one thing that I've always thought is interesting is how developers use third-party code. So we're talking libraries, SDKs, APIs. These are great. They're fantastic for efficiency, but they also introduce these potential risks, right?
Absolutely. I like to think of it like building a house. If you're building a house and you use prefabricated walls,
Okay.
if those walls have structural flaws, the whole house is going to be compromised.
I like that. That's a great analogy.
But it's the same with software.
So are you saying then that developers need to be extra cautious when they're incorporating these pre-built components?
Yeah, I mean, they need to thoroughly vet them. They need to understand the security implications.
Really look under the hood.
Exactly. And they have to ensure that they're kept up to date. I remember a situation where a company was using a very popular JavaScript library for user authentication, and they didn't realize the library had a known vulnerability. And let's just say it resulted in a pretty big data breach.
Wow. So it's one of those things where it's like, it can be a really small snippet of code,
Right.
but it can have these huge consequences.
Absolutely. A lot of these software vulnerabilities can be lurking in the most unexpected places.
Right.
And I think that leads us into our next point, which is managing the software supply chain.
Okay.
Because it's not just about the code you write. It's about all of the software your organization uses, even if it's acquired from a vendor.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the software supply chain.
Yeah.
So I've heard the term, but what does it really mean in the context of security?
So think of it as like the entire journey of software, from
Right.
its creation to its implementation, its maintenance within your organization. And like any journey, there are points along the way where things can go wrong,
Sure.
especially in terms of security.
So it's not just the software itself, it's everything around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to consider the vendor's security practices, the development process, the potential for vulnerabilities in third-party components, and even how the software is configured and maintained within your own environment.
So it's like this whole ecosystem that you have to sort of be paying attention to.
Yeah, it's a big task.
It is a big task. So if I'm an organization, how do I even start to wrap my head around all these risks and start to manage them effectively? What are the first steps?
Well, first of all, you can't have a set it and forget it mentality. Regular vulnerability scanning and patching are critical for any acquired software.
Got it.
It's just like taking your car for regular maintenance to prevent breakdowns. You need to do the same thing with your software, proactively scan for and address any potential weaknesses.
So are there specific tools, are there specific processes that we should be thinking about for this kind of software checkup?
Yeah, absolutely. There are different vulnerability scanners.
Okay.
Some focus on network vulnerabilities, others focus on web applications. The key is to choose the right tools for your environment and implement a consistent scanning schedule.
Okay, so it's not a one-time thing, it's this ongoing thing.
It's got to be ongoing, especially with how fast technology changes.
Exactly.
And don't forget about the open source components. We talked about third-party code earlier, but open source components are often hidden within larger software packages. Organizations really need to keep a comprehensive inventory of these to ensure they're properly managed and updated.
So it sounds like managing the software supply chain is a pretty complex undertaking.
It definitely can be, especially as organizations are relying more and more on cloud-based software.
Right.
But I think with the right approach, it is manageable. It requires diligence, a proactive mindset, and a clear understanding of the potential risks and how to mitigate them.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the software itself,
Hmm.
but what about the people involved in all of this?
Hmm.
Surely they play a pretty big role in software security as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the human element is often the weakest link in the security chain. We can have the most sophisticated security technologies in place, but if the people using them aren't properly trained or aware of security best practices, those technologies aren't going to be very effective.
Yeah, so how do we bridge that gap then? How do we make sure that the developers and other stakeholders that are working on this are equipped to be that, first line of defense?
Yeah, I think it starts with recognizing that developers are, in many ways, the security guardians.
Okay.
We need to empower them with the right knowledge and tools so they can make secure decisions throughout that whole development process.
So are we talking about turning every single developer into a security expert?
Not necessarily. It's more about creating a culture of security within the development team,
Boy.
where security is everyone's responsibility, not just the responsibility of the security team.
I like that, shifting that mindset from it's somebody else's problem to it's all of our problem.
Exactly.
Okay, so that involves providing developers with the right training and resources.
Yeah.
So when we talk about training, what kind of training are we talking about? Is it just about teaching them to write secure code, or is there more to it?
It's definitely more than that. Secure coding practices are a fundamental part of it, but it's broader than that. They need to understand different types of security threats, how to identify vulnerabilities in their own code, and how to implement security controls throughout the whole life cycle.
So it's more of a holistic approach, tailored to what they're actually doing every day.
Exactly.
Okay, and it's not just a one-time thing, right? This has got to be an ongoing process.
It has to be because, the threat landscape's constantly evolving.
So it's about keeping them engaged and keeping them informed and, keeping them empowered
Certainly.
through those active participants.
And that's where things like interactive training modules, capture the flag exercises, real-world simulations can be really helpful. Yeah.
Make it fun, make it engaging.
Exactly. When developers feel like they're actively contributing to the security of the software they build, they're much more likely to embrace those security practices and make them part of their everyday routine.
Okay, so we've talked about building secure software from the ground up, managing that software supply chain,
Yeah.
and really empowering developers to be those security champions. It sounds like securing software in the cloud is this multifaceted challenge
Yeah.
that really requires a comprehensive and collaborative approach.
Yeah, it definitely is, but it's an incredibly important and rewarding challenge, especially as more of our lives and businesses move into the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen how much is in the cloud now, and it's only going to increase in the future.
Absolutely.
So this is really the time to be thinking about these things.
Yeah, now's the time to get ahead of it. And it's not just about, checking boxes or meeting compliance requirements. It's really about understanding the real-world implications
Right.
of security vulnerabilities and how they can impact businesses, individuals, even critical infrastructure.
Yeah, you've mentioned some of those potential consequences before, and they can be pretty severe.
It can be.
Are there any specific examples that come to mind that really illustrate why it's so important to get this right?
Yeah, I think there have been a number of high-profile cases in recent years that really highlight how devastating a software supply chain attack can be. Take the SolarWinds incident, for example.
Yeah.
Malicious code was injected into a software update that was widely used,
Right.
and it ended up compromising thousands of organizations worldwide.
Yeah, and that was a huge wake-up call, I think, for a lot of companies because it demonstrated that even these trusted vendors can be compromised.
Exactly. And it really underscored the need for organizations to be vigilant about every single link in their supply chain.
Not just taking it for granted.
Yeah, not just relying on a vendor's reputation.
Okay, so if I'm an organization trying to assess these risks, where do I even begin? It seems like such a daunting task.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-layered process. I
Yeah.
think a good starting point is to establish a really comprehensive inventory. Okay.
Of all your software. So that includes internally developed software and acquired software.
Makes sense.
You need to know where each component comes from, what its purpose is, and its potential security implications.
So it's like having a map of your supply chain.
Exactly. And then you can start to delve deeper into each component, evaluate the vendor's security practices,
Yes.
examine the software's architecture, and conduct thorough vulnerability assessments.
And that's where those vulnerability scanners come in that we were talking about earlier.
Right. Vulnerability scanning is a critical part of that assessment process.
Yeah.
It helps you identify potential weak points in the software before an attacker can exploit them.
But it's not just about finding them, right? It's also about having a plan to actually address them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need a really well-defined vulnerability management process.
Okay.
That includes prioritizing vulnerabilities based on their severity,
Yeah.
developing a patching strategy,
Got it.
and tracking remediation efforts to ensure that vulnerabilities are addressed quickly. And that sounds like a lot of work, and it probably requires a lot of collaboration across different teams.
It does. Managing the software supply chain isn't just the responsibility of the security team.
Right.
You need developers, operations teams, procurement, even legal and compliance.
So it's really a team effort.
It is. And it requires a shared understanding of the risks and a commitment to working together to mitigate them.
And I think that brings us back to that idea of building a culture of security
Yeah.
within the organization, which you mentioned earlier. And I think it's so important. It's not just about having the right policies and technologies. It's about really fostering that environment where security is ingrained in every decision.
Yeah, in every process.
Yeah.
It's about creating that sense of shared ownership for security.
Right.
Where everyone feels empowered to identify and report potential risks, and where security is seen as an enabler rather than a roadblock.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So how do you go about actually building that kind of culture? You can't just flip a switch
Right. It doesn't happen overnight.
and suddenly everyone is, a security expert.
It's definitely a journey. It starts with leadership setting the tone from the top,
Oh,
making it clear that security is a priority,
got it.
and then providing the right training and resources to empower employees to make secure decisions.
And that training piece seems especially important for developers who are really on the front lines of this.
Yeah, they're the ones building and deploying the software.
Right.
So they need to be equipped with that knowledge
Absolutely.
and the skills to write secure code,
Mm.
identify and mitigate vulnerabilities, and just integrate those security considerations into their everyday work.
So what are some effective ways to deliver that kind of training?
Yeah.
We talked about, interactive modules and simulations, but are there other approaches that you've seen work well?
Yeah, there are a lot of different approaches, and I think it really depends on the organization and the team. But one approach that's gaining a lot of traction are secure coding competitions
Okay.
or hackathons.
I've heard of those.
They provide a fun and engaging way for developers to really test their skills, learn from each other, and get that hands-on experience.
Yeah, I like that because it makes it more interactive.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
just sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can also help foster that sense of camaraderie and friendly competition,
Oh, yeah.
which can be really beneficial.
Right, because it's like a team sport in a way.
It is, in a way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from the nuts and bolts of secure coding practices to managing the software supply chain, and that really important piece about building a security-conscious culture.
Yeah. And it's a lot to digest, I know, especially if you're preparing for the CCSP exam.
It is.
But hopefully this deep dive has provided some valuable insights
Yeah, I think so.
or practical takeaways that you can apply not only in your studies, but also in your future career.
Yeah, for sure. And as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize that the CCSP exam is more than just a test. It's really a gateway to a dynamic and rewarding field where you can really have an impact
Make a difference.
on how organizations protect themselves in the cloud.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that the knowledge you're gaining by studying for this exam isn't just theoretical.
Right.
It has very real practical applications that can help safeguard businesses, individuals, even entire industries from all these evolving threats.
So it's understanding the challenges, but also seeing all the possibilities that are out there.
For sure.
Because this field is constantly evolving. There's
Yeah.
new technologies emerging all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And new threats are always popping up, and then new solutions are being developed to try and counter those.
Right. It's always changing.
That's what makes it so challenging and so exciting.
It's definitely a dynamic field.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their journey in cloud security? As they're preparing for the CCSP exam, what are some things they should be thinking about?
I think first and foremost, just stay curious. Never stop learning. Never stop asking questions. Those CCSP exam is a fantastic foundation,
Yeah.
but it's really just the beginning of a lifelong journey in this field.
So continue to expand that knowledge and those skills and stay up to date on what's happening.
Exactly. Stay abreast of the latest trends and technologies. And I think, don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, and push the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah, be innovative, be adaptable.
Absolutely.
Okay. And any other advice in terms of, connecting with other people or, finding resources?
Oh, yeah. I mean, remember, you're not alone in this journey.
Right?
There's this huge community of cloud security professionals out there who are, willing to share their knowledge and experiences.
Awesome. So attend those industry events, join those online forums, connect with other people.
All great ways to learn and grow and stay ahead of the curve.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from secure coding practices to managing the software supply chain and that human element of security. It's clear that securing software in the cloud requires, that holistic approach, combining that technical expertise with a strong understanding of human behavior and how organizations work.
It really does. It's a complex puzzle, but it's one that's definitely worth solving.
It is.
And with the right knowledge, the right skills, the right mindset, you can be a key player in making the cloud a safer place for everyone.
Love that. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. As cloud technologies continue to advance, and they're advancing so quickly, what do you think the future holds for software security? What new challenges and opportunities are coming up?
Ooh, that's a great question to ponder. I think we're going to see an even greater emphasis on automation and AI in security to help organizations detect and respond to threats more efficiently.
So leveraging those advancements to kind of up our game.
Exactly. But we also need to be mindful of the potential risks associated with these technologies.
Because there are always going to be risks.
Right. As AI becomes more sophisticated, attackers are going to find new ways to exploit it.
So it's that constant arms race.
It really is. But that's what makes this field so dynamic and intellectually stimulating.
Right. Always got to be on your toes.
Yeah.
So to all you future cloud security rock stars out there, best of luck on your CCSP exam journey. And remember, it's not just about passing a test. It's about starting a career where you can make a difference.
That's right.
And remember, we're always here to help you dive deeper into the fascinating world of cloud security.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or just want to share your insights. And until next time, stay curious and stay secure.
Thanks for joining us.